All right, well, good evening. Thank you for attending tonight. Appreciate your participation and your willingness to take time out of your evening. We're going to have a short presentation with myself, talk about prescribed fire, and turn it over to other folks to talk a little bit more in depth about what we plan to do this spring and into the future. So I'll go ahead. I'm John Wallace. I'm the district ranger in Emmett, and go ahead. We'll just do that.
Okay. I'm Ryan Shanahan. I live here in Garden Valley. I am in charge of the prescribed fire and hazardous fuels management for Emmett Ranger District, Loman, and Cascade.
So I'm Justin Yankee, and I'm assistant fire management officer for fuels. So I deal with prescribed fire and selection of timber sales, and I'm on the Emmett.
And I'm Tracy Zimmerly, I'm the Loman District Manager.
All right. So, the purpose of the meeting is to talk about prescribed fire. And so if you have, we have comment cards too, but if it's two of you, we can probably address other comments that you may have. So, but if not, feel free to write them on a piece of paper. But the purpose is to talk about prescribed fire and, why here, why now? And you look just last year and then, the previous years, how many fires we have had on the Boise. And if you look at a historical fire map from the Boise, especially behind us, it's just speckled with fires of all different sizes. And so what can we do as an agency to try to mitigate some of the risk associated with those fires? Maybe keep them at a lower, smaller size and do good on the ground. And, the thing to remember is fire is natural in the western landscape, and it helps promote healthy stands, healthy forests. And when we do get a larger fire, it helps us to be able to manage that fire a little better. And I don't know, several fires we've had over the few years. Pioneer Fire, burnt over into the Loman fire and kind of came down, to the ground level, skunked around a little bit, and did a lot of good cleaning out some of the, newer growth, and did basically what a fire should do, cleaning out the forest. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do, from this, it's restarting the program, I guess. I wouldn't say restarting, but putting more fire on the ground from our methods. And so why are we doing this now? We've done it in the past in the Boise, but not to this scale, and we've always been good at planning, but sometimes had trouble implementing. And so why here, why now? Congress passed a bipartisan infrastructure law bill and allowed the Boise and the Payette to receive, several $1 million for treatments, and it includes pre-commercial thinning, prescribed fire, potentially commercial harvest and stuff like that. But prescribed fire will give us the best bang for our buck to be able to cover large acres for I wouldn't say easier cost, but to cover a larger scale and manage a larger area than just a small timber sale per se. So I don't know if that makes sense or not. But not working? So as you can see on the Boise, there's 400.
Computer, would that work?
What do we need? Scoot it back.
Yeah, other way. Closer.
Good. All right. So I don't know if this slide is updated or not, but I stole it from Cascade. I want to say we received more money than what's updated for the next 5 years, and the whole purpose is to try to restore to our forest to a more natural state, so they're more resilient to wildfire, they're more resilient to insect and disease and stuff like that. So, and then as you can see, 425,000 acres on the Boise is what we're looking to treat over the next 5 to 7 years. And kind of that's why we're here now, is because we can't do it alone. I heard you make a comment earlier about, putting smoke in the air, right? We're gonna be putting smoke in the air. But it's kind of catch-22 is we can either do it under controlled conditions where we know what the effect will be, or, we look at a wildfire and we don't have really any say in what's going on. So hopefully if we can get out ahead of the game enough, we'll start reducing those larger fires, but it's gonna take time. We started suppressing fires 100 years ago, and, that put us in the state where we are in now. We're kind of in a build, crash cycle. And implementing, whether it's some of these other actions over here in prescribed burning that will bring it back more into tune with what it should be on the landscape. And it's not, even we could be the best land manager out there, but we could still have a negative result. And that's one thing that, we need to relay as well, is even though we do the best job, we might not get what we're trying to do. And that's the risk component. And so we always, that's one of the main things that we ever talk about on the Forest Service's risk, and how do we mitigate that risk. And it's not that we're just gonna go out and say, good spot to burn, put fire in the ground and walk away, all right? We're still gonna have all the management actions that we need to do to make sure that fire is doing what it should be doing. So, to me, if I was out here, in that community, I think that would give me a little bit of an ease knowing that, we're just not we're gonna do everything, protect the property and all that kind of stuff, just like we normally would in a regular fire. And so I'm not sure where you live, but some of the things that you could do as a local community member is, a Firewise program, and Sarah over there has some stuff over there that talks about Firewise to fireproof your residence. And that would be, reducing small damaged trees and stuff like that, and getting the trees away from structures and stuff like that. So if a fire does happen, we have a better opportunity to either corral it around it or use the fences that you had to protect your property. So, because, you don't want your property burned, and we don't want your property to burn. And, it's not just the Forest Service. We're going to be reaching out to our partners as well, to the state, BLM, and be able to share resources to get fire on the ground and manage it the way it needs to be managed. So it's just not us out here. So, and let's see. So that picture here, I believe, well, that's the only map we have of that. So that is, the black line is the map of the southern Idaho landscape area. That's our main focus between the Boise and the Payette. And, you can see Crouch down here in the middle, and Banks, Garden Valley. So it's kind of right in the middle of what what activity is going to take place. And most of our treatments now are going to be in existing areas where we have project NEPA completed. So we already know, we have already analyzed the effects of what fire will do on the landscape. And, we're looking at, and Justin will get into that too, but, so Penny is fire Scriver. So yeah, Justin will cover all that, so I'll let him do that. I don't want to steal his thunder. And let's see. So kind of looks like the flyers over there, some of the objectives that we hope to achieve using prescribed fire and some of these other tools. And basically just to try to start restoring and getting the forest to a resilient state is the main objective. And then the overall goal, if you kind of look at the picture on the left, uncontrolled wildfire, right? Something that we really can't control. We can direct and do all this stuff, but it's going to go where it wants to go. Fire on the left, a little more managed, lower flame lengths, doing good, cleaning out the understory, and when you get done, have a good clean forest canopy or forest ground cover, I guess. I don't know what the best term is, but a good clean slate start over, right? And so but when we do those types of fires too, it still could burn larger pockets. But the main goal is it's going to burn smaller, larger pockets, if that makes sense, and be something that we can control and manage and make it go where we want to go. So that was my spiel. So I don't know if you have any questions on that.
Was that 425,000 acres on the Boise forest?
Yeah, and there was like 500 some odd pay at.
And then what's the largest prescribed burn that you would do?
Turn it over. for you folks on that question?
So, currently the largest one we have on forest, which Justin will speak to, is just north of town here. That's just shy of 1,000 acres. We can burn more than that, but a lot of times those big burns, we don't do them across one day, maybe across multiple days, or a few burn days over multiple weeks. So we don't necessarily burn that 1,000 acres at once, or if we have a 2,000 acre burn, we don't necessarily burn it all in one day. It may occur over a period of days.
So our overall goal though is to increase burn acres, right? So do you have a number that we would be looking to burn per year?
So right now, I think next year we're looking at, we have about 4,000 acres on the books for this spring. And we'll have some more for this fall. Next year we're looking at 4,000 to 5,000 acres. And then what we want to do is, we got to eat in small bites, right? We can't just eat the whole elephant at once. So we got to build some capacity and make prescribed fire more of a normal routine exercise for our troops. So we're looking at 4,000 this year, about 4,000 to 5,000 next year, and slowly increase that pace as we build our skill set and get more buy-in from local towns and our neighbors, and look for support there too. We should be increasing our pace.
I think overall, we need to get to where we can burn 15 to 20,000 acres on a yearly basis.
Across
So,
the whole forest.
what's that?
Across the whole forest.
Yeah. So not just in your backyard.
So if you were to do 1,000 acres piecemeal, over, how long would that take you to do?
It depends on the weather and the conditions. So here we might 3 separate burn days, let's say, over a period of 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It depends how fast the snow comes off, and there's different aspects in that 1,000 acres, right? So the east aspects to dry earlier in the spring, snow melts quicker, so those will be available to burn, followed by the west aspects and then the north aspects. So what you might see is we burn the east aspects first, and then the rest of that prescribed fire unit becomes available to fire. We burn the rest of it.
So actual fire season and fire activity throughout the state is going to impact your available personnel then.
It does, yeah.
You may not be able to do your prescribed burn when you wanted to, because you lost your people.
Yeah, we may. So last year was really bad, especially with the Southwest. We lost a lot of people early, and so they were not available. This year is different. There's not much fire activity anymore right now, so there's a lot more people around. But the trick is going to be there's 5 feet of snow, on some of the higher elevation units above town here. So the trick is for when that burns off, getting in there in a narrow window before we get our summer conditions. So this year we're probably going to have a lot shorter time frame to burn with all that snow out there because those high temps will come. Right, that typical weather we get in June. So finding hitting that good window there is we'll have a narrower window this year, but we should have people around.
And I think it's a priority for the whole agency, across the country, to get prescribed fire done in these high priority landscapes, like the Boise. So they've opened up other options for us that we haven't had in the past to use other contracting and other things that we haven't used in the past, contracting resources and,
That's a good segue. I'd like to lead with, do you mind?
Nope, go ahead.
So I can go point to the map if you want, but John, you have a map on here, maybe
Yep.
the last one. So what's up here is going to be a smaller subset. This is basically the center portion of John's map there. To the north, you can see where it runs up into the Payette National Forest in McCall, and then to the south, it runs down toward the front country north of Boise. So we're kind of zoomed in on the Crouch-Scarred Valley Lowman axis. And on that map, you can see those two roughly parallel orange lines. Those are the boundary of that priority area. So when that infrastructure law was passed about a couple of years ago, there were 10 areas initially identified to focus on. So what Tracy was talking about there, within those 10 areas, we recognize that you can't treat everything all at once with the same level of intensity and achieve success. So we're going to focus a little more. It doesn't mean through the exclusion of outside those areas, but we're going to apply a little more effort into these 10 priority areas. So this was one of the 10 priority areas selected across the nation. And one of the outcomes of that, kind of in the simplest terms, is they gave us some more authority to bring in help from elsewhere. So a lot of some of the rules, regulations, and laws that deal with how we hire contractors and how we pay for things and who we can bring in, those were relaxed somewhat in these 10 high priority areas. So it's easier for us to get help. So this spring, once it stops snowing and all the snow melts, we'll be able to get help in from more local resources, private contractors, as well as state, federal, nonprofit organizations across the country. That's not to say we're not treating outside of those 10 high priority areas, because we are. We just have access to more tools through some of the new authority they gave us. It's easier to bring people in. And then, so map kind of shows you we do have some projects outside of that priority area. This map shows Loman, but also Idaho City, and Idaho City, Cascade, Mount Home also have a lot of area outside that priority area. But we have burns planned in the spring. We also have ongoing logging and thinning in those outside that high priority area. And it's hard to see from here, but there's some red shapes up there. That's what we're planning to burn this spring to make the map look less busy. I didn't put all the stuff on there for the fall, and the logging is not on there, and the non-commercial thinning is not on there. So there's a lot of treatments on there that we're doing that are on the map, so you can at least kind of highlight what we're doing this spring. So Cascade, for example, has, in Emmett, Ranger District, especially west of Highway 55, have a lot of ongoing logging, and we're following that up with non-commercial thinning, small diameter trees, removing those, and prescribed fire. So a lot of those burns will tend to be smaller because we're coming in after the logging, cleaning up all the activity slabs we generated. But we do have some what we call natural fuels units where we haven't gone in and logged. We haven't manipulated the chainsaws, the forest landscape. So we do have this year up in Cascade and down in Loman and down to the south, and especially in Mount Home. We've got a lot of country that we're going to be prescribed burning. There'll be it hasn't been treated with logging, so it'll be more of a natural fire where we're burning up the natural fuel accumulation that's happened since the last fire. In Loman, for example, that was 30 years ago, an 89 fire. So there's a lot more treatment going on in that map shows, but we wanted to focus where our spring prescribed burning was. So if you take a look at it closer, the black shapes you see on there are ongoing projects we have, and so there's some degree of work going on all of them, and there's going to be a lot more this summer as far as logging and non-commercial thinning. There's also some more projects we have coming online, probably starting later this fall and next year. We'll add to the map for next year's meeting, right? So that's just kind of a big picture overview. Justin will speak at length about the local burn here. Up in Cascade, the units tend to be more tied to logging, and so they're pretty small, but they are adjacent to private property. On the west side of the Cascade Reservoir, and then there's some on the east side of Clear Creek. Up in Loman, we have a lot of burns, about 1,000 acres, units just outside of Loman proper, kind of north of the Ranger Station, east of Clear Creek. And then Idaho City has a few burns to our south, and then Mountain Home has a couple spread across their pretty big district. So that's just an overview of what we're doing this spring and how it kind of relates to that high priority area. We'll have some more assets in here for the burn that Justin's going to talk about with the crouch. It'll be easier to get resources in from across the nation and locally as well. If you have questions about any of that, we can have them now or later, and then I can turn it over to Justin and he can talk about the local burn.
Yeah, sounds good.
So you guys, you keep hearing about all these like fuel treatments to kind of reduce wildfire risk, and that's exactly what we're going to do on this burn that we have here. It's all those fuels accumulations, and Ryan and John talked about all the different ways we can reduce the fuels. And you'll see it a lot of times in wildfires when the fire's up in the crowns and the canopy and it's running, and we call it like a Kodak moment. There's nothing you can do but stand back and watch it. But where we've done fuel treatments, we can get the fire to drop down to the ground, and we can be way more successful catching it. So that's what we're like trying to get our forest back to, more historic fire regime. Historically, it burned every 5 to 25 years, and with the suppression, it just doesn't get burned that much to clean up all those fuels, so that the fuels accumulate, and then we get these large standard fires. The fire that we've got that will be important to the community of Crouch it's about 6 miles north of town, if you know where Scriver Creek is.
That's where we live.
Okay, so it's really close to you guys. It's about the Scriver Creek Road, basically at the Forest Service boundary, and it'll be directly north. DF Development owns that piece of land below or above the Scriver Creek Road and in between the Forest Service boundary. And it's that white line. So the white is the private on the map, and the orange is the burn unit, that first map on the left there. And it comes down the main Penny Creek drainage, but there's sub-bridges and finger draws and stuff up in there. Like Brian said, it's a 960 acre burn. We're going to be using a helicopter and possibly drones, and there'll be multiple shifts of ignition. First day it'll be just black line at the top of the unit, but it'll be highly visible from town. When the helicopter starts flying back and forth, it'll also be visible. We'll have signs posted along the road. We'll do more public media updates as we get closer to burning. This project was part of a larger EIS. That was the West Scriver EIS. So they did a lot of logging in there. It's one of the older projects we have on the district. It was signed in 2014, and they started logging in 2015. But in 2016, we had that large Pioneer fire. And so it kind of put this project on hold because all the loggers went to help out salvage logging from the Pioneer fire. So it's been a long process, and they've got extensions on the timber sale contracts, but we're finally to a point where in this area, all the logging has been finished and the thinning is done, and we've got it prepped for prescribed burning, so we're pretty excited about that. We talked about it's going to be multiple days of ignition, could be over weeks, as different aspects open up. So there will be smoke impacts expected. In the evening time, smoke settles into the valley, and then the early morning, sometimes before the sun starts hitting the ground and the wind starts kind of going more upslope and up drainage. But hopefully, if the conditions are good, the smoke impacts will be 1 to 3 days following the ignition. So we'll do our best to pick good days when we have good ventilation, and we can get that smoke up and moving out of here. A couple other things. I think it's already been mentioned, but I'll just say it again. Not all fire is bad fire. So prescribed fire is a good opportunity to manage fire when we want, like on our terms. We can adjust the intensity and the flame heights based on how much we light at a time. We start at the top, and fire naturally burns up slope, so we can adjust how much fire we put on the ground by how wide the strips are, just letting it burn up a little bit each time, and the wind's going up drainage. So it's a more managed fire than lighting at the bottom and letting the wind rush it to the top, which sometimes happens with wildfire. The good things that are going to happen is we're going to have reduced surface fuel accumulation, which contributes to large fires. It's going to increase the canopy height, so the ladder fuels that can carry fire into the canopy will burn those smaller branches off the trees, and the canopy height will be raised up. We'll also spread out the crown spacing, like in between the trees. There will be more space in between the trees so that fire can't travel from tree to tree. And then also just improving overall forest vegetation and wildlife habitat. You get less brush, more grass on the ground. It creates a healthier forest that's not choked out by small trees. And it pushes us more towards a more historical regime of a more dry site, ponderosa pine and Doug fir, more fire tolerant species. So there's a lot of good benefits from prescribed burning. And for our area, for the Emmett district this spring, the two that you can, that we'll be considering is going to be just north of town here, up Scriver Creek, real close to where you guys live. You're probably pretty familiar with that area. And then there's another prescribed burn area that's going to be just west of Highway 55. It's a little bit north of Banks, west up on the hill. Before you get to High Valley, but along that hillside, we've got two burn units over there. One is about 130 acres and the other one is about 40 acres. So potentially, depending on the day, you could see some of that smoke column coming off of there, and potentially some of that smoke could travel this way. But we'll definitely be watching the weather really hard and trying to pick our best burn days. But also with being on the national priority landscape, we are getting a strong emphasis to get the burn days we can. So they're giving us all the horsepower we need to get additional folks, and every burn day we have that's a good burn day, we're going to try really hard to go after them. So should be a good season. I don't know what kind of questions you guys have.
Where you go to house these folks?
So there's going to be like a team that helps to manage where the folks go across the whole forest. Actually, Quincy's helping out as operations on that team. It could look like a fire camp or dispersing people out across the forest, but there's a few different places they've talked about.
Likely the most likely camping and command post would be either Idaho City or Burn Valley here at the Ranger Station, and it really depends on how the snow is coming off and what the weather's like. And so where do our as prescribed burn units become available, where's this most sensible place logistically to put people, reduce travel time, and so it could be Garden Valley, could be Idaho City, Cascade, because it's a little bit further from most of the forest, will probably have its own little satellite camp. But there will be folks moving around back and forth. Typically, if you think about, it takes a couple days for people to get on site, prep, get familiar with the unit, and then you burn it a day or two, and you hold it. And so some folks might spend, close to a week somewhere, and then if we still have good prescribed burning weather. Once we've got that, a particular burn unit, we're comfortable with its status. We'll move people somewhere else and start burning another unit. So there'll be some movement around for us.
And hopefully as we get closer, we'll talk to the radio station, we'll post flyers around town. Venisha's with the forest, and she's super helpful with public information. So
when we talked about smoke earlier, and I know that you mentioned this, and that as soon as there's smoke in the air, there's going to be people knocking on the door and ringing the phones, and it's very true. And so when Justin was talking about good burn days and good ventilation days, no matter what kind of burn day it is, even on a good day, we're still going to put up a lot of smoke, and there's going to be a lot of smoke that stays residual. Probably for a couple days, maybe a little more, that lingers in the valley bottoms and will definitely impact Crouch and Garden Valley. So we work with the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality and some other cooperators to manage all the smoke coming up. So we don't just burn willy-nilly, we coordinate with other people and make sure that there's not too much smoke in the air. So the state is kind of one of the key players there, and they'll tell us, hey, this is what we're hearing from all of you. And we got from McCall, in the Payette National Forest down to on the Boise, all the way down to Mountain Home and Idaho City. There's too much smoke in you guys are proposing too much in some of these areas on a given day, so we're going to have, some of you need to stand down. And so we'll coordinate and make sure that we'll stand down to maybe some of the lower priority burns, and so that we can take care of, get some of the burning done, but not overload the entire, we call it an air shed. It's a huge area, right? so we don't overload the system with smoke.
So is there a possibility of getting some smoke monitors put up if we can get a lot of them going and get that information out
Yeah.
to the older people? Because
Yes.
there are a lot of older people around here.
And so in Garden Valley, we have our own smoke monitor here. So at the post office. So I mean that'll give you a fairly good. That's going to measure what we do, and so you can access that off the state DEQ website, their air quality page.
Yeah, if you go to Idaho DEQ website, you can see all the monitors on there. You can see what they are.
And that will tell you what we're doing. So.
I just think that'd be a good thing to get out to the public.
Yeah.
Where they can go to get that so they can come and watch that. A lot of retired people up here want that issue.
Yep. No, it's a good idea. You know, here it can be kind of a bathtub, but Cascade especially is kind of a bathtub for smoke as well. You just sit there, especially in the summertime.
That's one other question I got is, how close have you been working with Fish and Game on, the size of these burns and stuff?
So the fish
This is a big winter range area in here.
So certain areas are more critical for game than others, and we generally don't coordinate directly with the Fish and Game on the actual burning. That comes in on the planning side, kind of well ahead, so that as we plan for these, sometimes a year or two in advance, we've identified areas where we're going to maybe not burn during certain times of the year, or we're going to burn smaller chunks so we disrupt. It's less of a disturbance. So most of that coordination is usually in the much earlier stage with the state Fish and Game.
So to recap, 960 acres up off of Scriver Creek, and the approximate start date, depending on the weather. What's your hopeful date?
It's April 10th.
It keeps, it keeps getting pushed back. Maybe the second week of May could be like the best case scenario right now.
You know, one thing I think we're worried about is the weather changes like you flip a light switch, and all of a sudden it goes from we getting all this precip to the snow comes off, and then we don't get any more at all. So then you have to factor, well, we'll light a lot of fire, but if it doesn't look like there's any favorable weather, is that a risk worth taking, especially with so many homes and people nearby?
Yeah. Okay.
We do work closely with the National Weather Service too, with forecasting, spot weather forecasts to see what we have coming in, not just the day of the burn, but what's coming in for the next several days, especially for something large like that. We want to make sure we've got, we call it burner, but they're getting ahead of it, we can manage it.
And there's a ton of documents for anything government. So we've had a 90-day pause on all our prescribed burning. We've rewritten all our burn plans. We've re-gone through all our complexities. And every day we're talking with the line officer to double check, cross all the T's and dot all the I's. Brian talked about we can't just burn without smoke approval. We have to get approval through the airship managers. It's a process. It's definitely, there's a lot of checks and balances before we get to the point of being able to put a fire on the ground.
The airship management, it's a collaboration between the federal, state, local, as well as private industry, because private industry does a lot of burning too. So they all kind of weigh in and are members of the organization. And, the meteorology is all, day of and day before, it factors a lot in decision making. So it's not just the federal government per se, policing itself. It's just a collaboration of a lot of different local, state, federal governments and private owners, industrial landowners.
We talked about helicopters. If we see fixed wing in the air, does that mean things went wrong?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, we don't use fixed wing generally on prescribed burns. So.
Okay.
We also have a process for that. If the fire is exceeding our objectives a little, we work through that process of know, whether or not we stop ignitions, or if it's burning outside the area we want it to, we can't declare it a wildfire. If that's the case, that's probably what we think.
Then it'd be full suppression.
Then we'd suppress it, you know, the whole fire would change
Now,
that.
there probably will be some fixed wing involvement, especially if we light a lot of fire, but you may not be aware of it. We'll probably fly infrared detection at night, and they fly at a higher elevation. And so when it's cooler out, they'll fly and they'll find the hotspots for us as we go out there the next morning. It's a good indicator of where to look, right?
If we're lucky, we might get to use some drones, unmanned aircraft. But they're in high demand also. So.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer your questions?
Yeah.
You haven't asked any questions?
He's planning, he's the one who knows about that. I'm just agreeing with this.
What's your comfort level?
We moved that way.
Your comfort level with what we've been talking about?
You're not the only one.
I know that happens, so I can't say I'm totally comfortable with it. You know, but it's better than planning fire.
Yeah, I think in the long run, yeah, it's
See, he's the fire every summer, so I know what they do, I know, we look at it, so
Yeah.
it's just part of the life, I guess. As far as that, what you're comfortable with, yeah, it knows.
And our folks live up here too, Ryan.
I live close to you guys.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm sort of bluff.
We
Okay.
joked around, he could be the lookout from his back porch. I think.
Yeah.
I'll be probably the first one to know, John, something's not right. Or, hey, it looks good.
Hopefully the first one to open it out there too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy.
Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, we'll share it and see what we get. Hopefully the audio worked out good. But I'll put a little blurb as to